Our journey begins in the port of Avonmouth on the Bristol Channel, before following the river to the historic city and port of Bristol itself. Our journey then heads south towards the Mendip Hills and one of England's greatest natural treasures, Cheddar Gorge, the largest canyon in the country. We'll then continue south to explore the Somerset Levels, an area of wetlands that have been inhabited by man for 500,000 years. We cross the sandstone hills of the Quantocks before passing over the resort town of Minehead and into the Exmoor National Park and its dramatic coastline of wooded cliffs and sandy beaches. We then cross the park to the North Devon coast and the picturesque, world-famous hillside village of Clovelly, where our journey ends. On the Severn Estuary at the mouth of the River Avon lies a small town called, appropriately enough, Avonmouth. The port here was first opened in 1877 and today is one of the UK's major facilities of its kind for chilled foods. Another vital commodity that comes in is coal, and Avonmouth has the capacity to unload 10,000 tonnes a day. The port was created here to compete with the success of Liverpool, as larger 19th century ships could not get up to Bristol through the narrow Avon Gorge. And spanning the gorge, as it has done for more than 150 years, is the Clifton Suspension Bridge. Designed by the great Victorian engineer Isambard Kingdon Brunel, it suffered a number of setbacks on its way to completion, including the Bristol riots, which erupted only days after its construction began in June of 1831. As a result of these delays, Brunel, sadly, did not live to see his masterpiece finished. It was completed as his memorial and finally opened with a grand ceremony on the 8th of December 1864. It has stood as the very symbol of Bristol ever since. Renowned for its beauty, the bridge has also played host to a number of significant events, including the very first modern bungee jump in 1979. And despite being built to accommodate 19th century horse-drawn carriages, Clifton Suspension Bridge is still today able to meet the needs of the 4 million cars that cross it each year. The largest city in the southwest of England is the newly revitalised Bristol. Thanks in part to its most infamous son, the mischievous street artist known only as Banksy, what began as a simple port town has, in recent decades, become a thriving artistic centre with a rich connection to its own exciting history. And one of the most beautiful pieces of that history is the SS Great Britain. She now stands as a floating museum in the dock where she was built in the 1840s, the first iron-hulled steamer to cross the Atlantic. Not far from the city proper is the village of Clifton, with its hilltops crowned by picturesque rows of curving Georgian terraces. This former spa resort remains Bristol's most elegant suburb. Rising out of the lush green forests of North Somerset, a few kilometres southwest of Bristol, is the stunning Gothic Revival house known as Tinsfield. This fairy tale-like mansion, punctuated by frequent pinnacles and turrets, actually began life as a simple hunting lodge, but was transformed into a luxurious country house in the 1860s by businessman William Gibbs, after he purchased the land 30 years earlier. This tour de force of 19th century architecture remained virtually unknown to the outside world until very recently. In 2002, with the death of Tinsfield's last owner, Richard Gibbs, the entire estate was in danger of collapse and may have been once again lost to private wealth or even demolished had the National Trust not swept in at the 11th hour to purchase the mansion and restore it to its former glory. And only 10 days after the purchase, Tinsfield was open to the public, so all could experience the wonder of this hidden treasure house from the Victorian age. Nearby is the hill fort Cadbury Camp. The picturesque grass embankments, encircling approximately 28,000 square metres, are man-made fortifications. The exact details of the origin of this Iron Age hill fort are unknown, but it's believed to have been constructed by the local Dubuni tribe in the 6th century BC. Archaeological discoveries at the camp have indicated that the site was inhabited well before the fort was built, dating it back to the last days of the Stone Age. Just to the southwest, on the shores of the Severn Estuary, is the resort town of Clevedon and its historic pier. Stretching across the water for 312 metres, this magnificent structure was built from 370 tons of man-handled wrought iron and officially opened to the public on Easter Monday, 1869. Thanks to a painstaking restoration, the pier continues to be a popular place for visitors to stroll along and anglers to leisurely while away the days. Travelling south, we continue to the breathtaking limestone cliffs of Cheddar Gorge. Carved into the landscape by the waters of melting glaciers during the last ice age, this is the deepest natural canyon in England, rising in some places as high as 138 metres above the road that snakes through the nearly 5-kilometre long ravine. The cliffs that comprise the gorge offer some 350 officially graded rock climbing routes. There are caves in the rock face, and several are open to the public. And it was in one of these in 1903 that Britain's oldest complete human skeleton was found. Simply named Cheddar Man, it was shown to be 9,000 years old, but carbon dating points to the caves having been inhabited for many thousands of years before he lived and died here. Today, Cheddar Gorge is visited by more than 500,000 people each year and regularly included in virtually every list of Britain's greatest natural attractions. These are the Somerset Levels. They are very flat and largely below sea level, and one of England's largest natural wetlands, covering 70,000 hectares across the county of Somerset. The Romans were the first to build flood defences, digging an intricate network of channels and ditches to drain the levels and protect the land from the tides of the Severn Estuary. In the Middle Ages, it fell to monks from nearby monasteries to draw off the waters and manage the land. In the 17th century, Dutch engineers took over the complex job, and today the levels are maintained by drainage boards and local farmers. At the mouth of the River Parrett and Bridgewater Bay is the popular resort of Burnham-on-Sea. Until the arrival of the railway in 1858, Burnham was little more than a few cottages and a church. But by the 1860s, this sleepy seaside village had woken up to a new identity as a holiday destination. Also on the North Somerset coast is the decommissioned Hinkley Point nuclear power station, which was built in 1965. In late 1999, Hinkley Point was shut down following a safety review. But a new plant will be brought to life here in 2023, and which will remain in operation for another 60 years. Inland from the coast are the majestic sandstone hills called the Quantocks, drawing a 19-kilometre crescent along the edge of Somerset. A mixture of valleys, moors and ancient wilderness, they have been designated as an area of outstanding natural beauty and are beloved by hikers and cyclists who come by their thousands each year to explore this beautiful landscape, including pristine summits and deep woods, all of which have been inhabited since prehistoric times. This is the West Somerset Railway. It was originally opened in 1862 to accommodate journeys between Taunton and Watchet. Four to six trains carried passengers and cargo along this route for more than 100 years, until the line was closed in 1971. Only 5 years later, it was reopened as a private concern, and today it remains the longest standard gauge heritage railway in the United Kingdom. Perched dramatically on a wooded hill overlooking the coast is Dunster Castle. This stronghold began as a simple hill fort and has been occupied for more than a millennium, 600 years of which saw it owned by the Luttrell family. In 1650, following a fierce siege and occupation during the English Civil War, Cromwell's parliamentary forces ordered that the still defensible fortress be demolished. 200 men spent 12 days smashing the castle walls to rubble, but fortunately the mansion was left standing and is now open to the public. Moving north up the coast, we find the seaside town of Minehead, offering residents and visitors a cafe-lined promenade, sandy beaches, and the starting point of the nation's longest countryside walking trail. Minehead serves as the gateway to the expansive, uninterrupted serenity of Exmoor National Park, one of the UK's greatest treasures. Here, huge, wide open skies serve as a perfect backdrop to coal-black cliffs containing exposed fossils inside sheer walls that plunge down to the golden sand beaches and sheltered bays of the Bristol Channel. One of the most striking vistas in Exmoor is the Pebble Beach breakwater at Porlock Weir. This is a popular hiking trail which leads to the small harbour of the same name, which has a history stretching back over 1,000 years to the days of the Anglo-Saxons who plundered the area. Later centuries saw coal delivered from the Welsh mines, and in World War II, the surrounding forest produced thousands of pit props, which went back to Wales as coal production increased. The Exmoor coastline is one of the most remote in all of the UK, stretching for nearly 60 kilometres. It's also the highest in England and Wales, with Culburn Hill rising to 433 metres above the sea. Tucked away here on the border between the counties of Somerset and Devon is the secluded Glenthorne House. Built in 1930 by the Reverend Walter Halliday, who traded his clerical collar for a fine estate when he inherited his father's vast fortune, the house remains in the Halliday family to this day. A few miles to the west, the dramatic coastline of North Devon leads to the picturesque twin towns of Linton and Lynmouth. The sleepier Linton sits atop steep wooded cliffs overlooking the lively seaside town of Lynmouth nearly 200 metres below. A water-powered cliffside railway, driven by the West Lynn River more than a mile away, connects the two villages, offering a charming and convenient mode of transport. Renowned for their unblemished beauty, Linton and Lynmouth have hosted a number of legendary guests over the years, including the writer C.S. Lewis and the poet Percy Bysshe Shelley. Sadly, the towns have seen tragedy as well. On the 15th of August 1952, after a day of torrential rainfall, the powerful West and East Lynn rivers overflowed their banks, crushing a number of homes in their paths. All told, 28 souls were lost to the floodwaters that day. Just over a kilometre from Linton finds us inside the extraordinary stone world known as the Valley of the Rocks. It's believed that this incredible panorama was crafted by the rushing waters of the West Lynn River, which once flowed through here before the cliffs were dissected by coastal erosion. A different aquatic force is responsible for these incredible rock formations. With outstanding names like Devil's Cheese Ring and Ragged Jack, they were sculpted by the frigid hands of glacial runoff during the last ice age. The spectacular landscape has caught the eye of a number of great poets over the years, including William Wordsworth and Robert Southey, who described the valley's rock faces as the very bones and skeletons of the earth. Exmoor National Park is much more than just a beautiful coastline, as it encompasses a unique combination of moors, forests, valleys and farms. It was designated as a national park in 1954, and today, not only is the land here safeguarded, so are the skies. In 2011, Exmoor became the first place in all of Europe to have been awarded special protected status by the International Dark Sky Association. The park is also home to a wide range of plant and animal life, none more majestic than the red deer. These are the largest native land mammals in the UK, and though they have survived in very few places in Britain, here in Exmoor they continue to flourish, as they have done since prehistoric times. Their stronghold in the park is owed to the fact that Exmoor was once a royal forest and hunting ground, with strict laws prohibiting any unauthorised killing of the deer. As we head southwest, returning to the coast, we pass over a patchwork of farms, where more than 1,000 different types of plants and grasses grow in much the same fashion as they have since medieval times. Sheep, ponies, and perhaps something more mysterious and deadly roams the tranquil farmlands. Local legend tells of an elusive cat-like creature known as the Beast of Exmoor that has prowled these grounds for decades, feasting on livestock whenever it likes. Back by the sea, we find ourselves over the sandy beaches of Braunton on the North Devon coast, which hosts the nation's first surf museum. These long, flat beaches boast some of England's best waves, and are famous for having once hosted more than 700 wrought iron hospital beds on the cover of Pink Floyd's 1987 album, A Momentary Lapse of Reason. Braunton's beaches also played a significant role in military history. It was on these very sands that Lieutenant Colonel Paul W. Thompson trained the United States forces in preparation for their D-Day assault on the heavily fortified beaches of Normandy. But the area is certainly most famous for its spectacular network of sand dunes, known as the Braunton Burrows. This is the largest system of its kind in the United Kingdom. The dunes form the core of the North Devon Biosphere Reserve, held alongside the likes of Mount Vesuvius and the Gobi Desert for its international significance. With fuel running low, we have to divert to a small heliport close to our next location. It's the only place for us to refuel in this part of the country. But soon enough we're back to our journey, and it's Westward Ho. Not just a turn of phrase, it's the actual name of this small seaside village on the south end of Northern Burrows. Aside from its odd name, this place is primarily known for its pristine beaches, which are backed for more than 3 kilometres by the remarkable Pebble Ridge. Composed of fine-grained sandstone, the pebbles were made of boulders that slipped into the ocean, were rounded into cobbles by crashing waves, and deposited between Westward Ho and the Tor estuary. The town takes its unusual name from the title of Charles Kingsley's 1855 novel, which was set in a nearby village. The book was hugely popular at the time, and the name was chosen by crafty hoteliers to increase tourism in the area. The idea eventually worked. Prior to the publication of Kingsley's novel, this land was home to little more than a single farm and a few scattered cottages, but was slowly developed into the holiday destination town it remains today. Westward Ho is the only town in England with an exclamation point as an official part of its name. Continuing along the coastline towards our final destination, we take another look at the dramatic cliffs and rocks of the North Devon coast. In 1959, every centimetre of this shoreline was designated as an area of outstanding natural beauty to ensure its protection. Our last stop is at the uniquely charming village of Clovelly. The entirety of this small fishing harbour is built along a steep, wooded hillside and contains only a single street, cobblestoned and clustered with small shops and 16th century cottages, as it winds its way down to the ancient harbour. Though the road is less than a kilometre long, it sharply drops 122 metres along its way, making it too steep for automobile traffic, so donkeys remain a popular and quaint transit system within the small village. Also unusual is the fact that the entire village is privately owned, as it has been since the middle of the 13th century. In the nearly 800 years that have followed, only 3 families have held the deed to this place. Sheltered from the outside world by thick woodland and the Bristol Channel at the port, and with a population of only 443 people, Clovelly has remained remarkably unchanged for several centuries. It's a beautiful reminder that even in the modern world, a quiet, picturesque place like this can still exist, and it's a perfect place to end our journey.